The pond behind my house froze solid in January. Mom said I could skate on it, but only during the day when she could watch from the kitchen window. But that night, I couldn't sleep. The full moon made the ice look like a giant mirror, and I wanted to skate under the stars. I put on my warmest coat and grabbed my skates. The cold air bit my face as I stepped outside. Everything was quiet except for the crunch of snow under my boots. The pond looked perfect, smooth and white like glass. I sat on the old wooden dock and put on my skates. The laces were stiff from the cold, but I got them tight. When I stepped onto the ice, it felt solid and safe. I pushed off and glided across the surface. It was amazing. The moon lit up everything around me. My breath came out in white puffs as I skated in circles. I felt like I was flying. This was so much better than skating during the day with Mom watching and worrying. After a few minutes, I stopped in the middle of the pond to catch my breath. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping sound coming from below. Tap, 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 like someone knocking on a door. I looked down at the ice under my feet. It was thick and cloudy, but I thought I saw something moving underneath. Probably just a fish, I told myself. But the tapping got louder. I skated to a different spot, but the tapping followed me. Now it sounded like someone was hitting the ice with their fists. My heart started beating fast. I decided to go home, but as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood freeze. There was a dark shape under the ice, and it was big, too big to be a fish. It looked like a person. The shape moved closer to the surface. I could see long hair floating around a pale face. It was a girl about my age, and her eyes were wide open. She was looking right at me. I tried to skate away, but my legs felt like rubber. The girl under the ice was moving her mouth like she was trying to talk. Her hands pressed against the bottom of the ice, and I could see her fingers spread out like starfish. Then I heard her voice. It came through the ice as clear as if she was standing next to me. "Help me," she whispered. "I've been down here so long. So cold, so dark. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move." The girl's face was getting clearer. Her skin was blue-white, and ice crystals covered her eyelashes. "What's your name?" she asked. "Emma," I said without thinking. "Emma," she repeated and smiled. Her teeth were black. "That's a pretty name." My name was Katie. I fell through the ice last winter. I've been waiting down here ever since. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "but I have to go home now." "No," Katie said, and her voice got angry. "You can't leave me here. I'm so tired of being cold. I want to be warm again. I want to breathe again." The ice under my feet started to crack. Little lines spread out like spider webs. I could hear the ice groaning and popping. "What are you doing?" I cried. "Trading places," Katie said. "You go down there, and I'll come up here. It's only fair. You get to be warm all the time." Now it's my turn. The cracks got bigger. Freezing water started seeping up through the holes. My skates were getting wet. "Please don't," I begged. "I have a family. My mom is waiting for me." "I had a family too," Katie said, "but they stopped looking for me. They think I'm gone forever. But I'm not gone. I'm right here, and I'm hungry for life." The ice cracked loud like thunder. I fell to my knees as cold water soaked through my pants. Katie's hands pushed up through the cracks, and her fingers were long and white like icicles. I crawled toward the shore, but the ice kept breaking behind me. Katie's head started pushing through the water. Her hair was frozen solid, and her eyes glowed like pale moons. "Don't run, Emma," she called. "It won't hurt for long. Just let the cold take you. Let it fill your lungs. Then you can sleep like I did." I reached the edge of the pond and climbed onto the dock. My skates slipped on the wooden boards, but I kept going. I could hear Katie pulling herself out of the water behind me. "Emma, wait," she screamed, and her voice echoed across the frozen yard. I ran to the house without looking back. My hands shook as I fumbled with the door handle. Finally, I got inside and locked the door. I pressed my back against it and tried to catch my breath. From the kitchen window, I looked out at the pond. The ice was solid again, like nothing had happened, but I could see wet footprints leading from the water to our back door. They ended right where I was standing. I ran upstairs to my room and hid under my blankets. All night, I heard tapping on my window. Soft at first, then harder and harder. In the morning, Mom found me still in my skating clothes. "Why are you dressed like that?" she asked. "Did you go skating last night?" "No," I lied. "I just fell asleep in my clothes." But when we looked out the window, there were cracks all across the pond. The ice was too dangerous to skate on anymore. "That's strange," Mom said. "It was perfect yesterday." I nodded and tried to smile, but I knew Katie was still down there, waiting. And every night when the moon is full, I hear her tapping on the ice, calling my name. The worst part is, sometimes I want to answer. Sometimes the idea of being cold and quiet forever doesn't seem so bad. Because Katie was right about one thing, I do get to be warm all the time. But not at night. At night, I'm always cold now. And I know that someday, when I'm not strong enough to say no, I'll go back to that pond. I'll put on my skates one more time. And Katie will be waiting for me under the ice, ready to make that trade she promised. It snowed for 3 days straight in February. When it finally stopped, the snow was almost up to my waist. Dad said I could build a snowman in the front yard while he shoveled the driveway. I rolled the biggest snowball I could for the bottom, then a medium one for the middle, and a smaller one for the head. The snowman was taller than me when I finished. I found some sticks for arms and used Dad's old hat and scarf. "He needs eyes," I said to myself. I looked around the yard, but all I could find were some small rocks covered in snow. They weren't big enough or dark enough to make good eyes. That's when I remembered the woods behind our house. "I'll be right back," I called to Dad. He waved from the driveway where he was still shoveling. I walked into the woods, stepping high through the deep snow. Everything was white and quiet. The bare tree branches looked like skeleton arms reaching up to the gray sky. After walking for a few minutes, I found what I was looking for. There was a small clearing where the snow wasn't as deep, and scattered around were some perfect black stones. They were smooth and round, about the size of golf balls. Just right for snowman eyes. I picked up 2 of the best ones. They felt warm in my hands, which was weird because everything else was freezing cold. The stones were so black, they seemed to soak up light. When I held them up, I couldn't see through them at all. Walking back to the house, I kept the stones in my pockets. They stayed warm the whole time, like little heaters against my legs. Dad was finishing up the driveway when I got back. "Find some good eyes?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, pulling out the stones. "These should work great." Dad looked at them for a second. His face got a strange expression, but then he shrugged. "They're certainly dark enough. Go ahead and finish your snowman." I pushed the stones into the snowman's head. They went in easily, like the snow was soft butter. Once they were in place, they looked perfect. The snowman seemed to be staring right at me. "There," I said, stepping back to admire my work. "Now you can see everything." That night at dinner, I kept looking out the window at my snowman. With the porch light on, I could see his dark eyes clearly. They seemed to shine in the light. "That's a nice snowman you built, Jamie," Mom said. "Very realistic looking." "Thanks," I said, but something bothered me about the way she said realistic. I looked out the window again. The snowman was still there, still staring at the house with those black stone eyes. The next morning, I woke up early and looked out my bedroom window. The snowman was still in the front yard, but something was different. He was facing the house now. I was sure I had built him facing the street. Dad must have turned him around, I thought. But why would Dad do that? At breakfast, I asked him about it. "I didn't touch your snowman," Dad said. "Maybe the wind moved him." "Wind doesn't turn snowmen around," I said. "Well, I don't know what else it could be," Dad replied, but he looked confused too. I went outside to check on the snowman after breakfast. He was definitely facing the house now, and his stick arms seemed to be pointing toward my bedroom window. The black stone eyes were looking right up at where I slept. I tried to turn the snowman's head back toward the street, but it wouldn't move. The snow felt hard and frozen like ice. When I pushed on the head, my hand just slipped off. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Every time I looked out my window, the snowman was there, staring up at me. His eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight, like they had their own light inside them. Around midnight, I woke up because I heard something outside. It sounded like footsteps in the snow. Heavy, slow footsteps. I crept to my window and peeked through the curtains. The snowman was gone. My heart started pounding. I looked all around the yard, but I couldn't see him anywhere. Where could a snowman go? Then I heard the footsteps again, and they were coming from right below my window. Something was walking around the house. I was too scared to look down, so I just lay in bed with the covers over my head. The footsteps went around and around the house all night long. Sometimes they stopped right under my window, like something was standing there, looking up. In the morning, the snowman was back in the front yard, but now he was much closer to the house. He was only about 10 feet from the front door, and he was still facing my window. This is getting weird, I said to myself. I went downstairs to tell Mom and Dad, but they were both acting strange. What snowman? Mom asked when I mentioned it. The one I built yesterday, in the front yard. Mom looked out the window. I don't see any snowman, honey. I looked too. The snowman was right there, plain as day. His black eyes were staring at the house, and his stick arms were reaching toward the front door. He's right there, I said, pointing, but Mom just shook her head. There's nothing there, Jamie. Just snow. Dad couldn't see him either. I began to think I was going crazy, but I knew the snowman was real. I could see him perfectly. That day at school, I couldn't concentrate. All I could think about was the snowman and his black stone eyes. During math class, I drew pictures of him in my notebook. In every picture, he was getting closer to the house. When I got home, the snowman had moved again. Now he was right next to the front porch, and his head was turned toward the front door. One of his stick arms was pointing right at the doorknob. I ran inside and locked the door behind me. Mom, Dad, I called, but no one answered. I found a note on the kitchen table that said they had gone to the store and would be back in an hour. I was alone in the house with that thing outside. I went to my room and tried to do homework, but I kept hearing noises. Scratching sounds like tree branches against the windows. But there were no trees close enough to the house to make those sounds. As it got dark, the scratching got louder. It sounded like something was trying to get inside. I turned on all the lights in my room and tried not to look outside. But I had to look. I had to know where the snowman was. I peeked through the curtains, and my blood turned to ice. The snowman was right outside my window, pressed against the glass. His black stone eyes were huge and staring right at me. His stick arms were scratching against the window, trying to get in. But the worst part was his mouth. When I built him, he didn't have a mouth. Now there was a jagged hole in his face, full of darkness. And from that hole came a whisper that I could hear through the glass. Let me in, Jamie. I want to come inside where it's warm. I want to be close to you. I backed away from the window, but the scratching continued. The black eyes seemed to follow me as I moved around the room. I've been so cold for so long, the voice whispered. Those stones you found, they belong to someone else. Someone who froze in those wood a long time ago. And now I'm awake, and I need a warm place to live. I understood then. The stones weren't just stones. They were the eyes of something that had died in the cold woods. And I had brought it back to life by putting them in my snowman. The scratching stopped suddenly. Everything was quiet. I waited by my bedroom door listening. After a few minutes, I heard Mom and Dad come home. Their voices were normal and cheerful as they put away groceries. Jamie, Mom called. We're home. I ran downstairs, so happy to see them. There's something outside, I said. The snowman. He's alive, and he's trying to get in. But when we looked out the front window, the yard was empty. Just smooth, white snow with no sign that a snowman had ever been there. See, Dad said, Nothing to worry about. I wanted to believe him, but I knew better. I went to my room early that night and piled furniture in front of the window. Around midnight, the scratching started again. This time, it wasn't coming from my window. It was coming from inside the walls. "I'm inside now, Jamie," whispered the voice. I found another way in, and now I'll never be cold again. The temperature in my room dropped so fast I could see my breath. I started forming on the inside of my windows. And somewhere in the darkness of my room, I saw two black stones glowing like eyes, getting closer and closer. I pulled the blankets over my head and waited for morning, but I knew the cold was here to stay. The snowman had found his way inside, and now winter would last forever. It started on the coldest night of winter. I was in my bedroom doing homework when I heard someone calling for help outside. The voice was faint, like it was coming from far away, but I could hear it clearly through my window. "Help me," the voice said. "Please, someone help me." I looked outside, but all I could see was snow falling in the light from our porch. The voice sounded like a kid about my age, and they sounded scared. I ran downstairs to tell Mom and Dad. "There's someone outside calling for help," I said. "They sound like they're in trouble." Dad put down his newspaper and went to look out the front window. "I don't see anyone, Tyler. Are you sure you heard something?" "Yes. Listen." We all stood quietly, but the voice had stopped. Dad opened the front door and looked around the yard. There were no footprints in the snow, no sign that anyone had been there. "Maybe it was the wind," Mom said. "Sometimes it can sound like voices." But I knew what I had heard. It wasn't the wind. It was a real person asking for help. The next night, I heard it again. This time I was ready. I had my flashlight and my warm coat by my bed. When the voice started calling, I put them on quickly and went to my window. "Help me," the voice said. "I'm so cold. I can't find my way home." I shined my flashlight out into the yard, but I still couldn't see anyone. The voice seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. "Where are you?" I called through the glass. The voice got excited. "You can hear me? Oh, thank goodness. I've been calling for so long, but no one ever answers." "Where are you?" I asked again. "I can't see you." "I'm lost," the voice said. "I've been walking in the snow for hours. Everything looks the same. I can't find a path home." I wanted to help, but I couldn't see anyone to help. The voice sounded like it was right outside my window, but when I looked down, there was nothing but empty snow. "What's your name?" I asked. "Danny," the voice replied. "My name is Danny Miller. I live on Oak Street. Do you know where that is?" I didn't know where Oak Street was. It was only a few blocks away from my house. But how could Danny be lost so close to home? "Oak Street is that way," I said, pointing toward the direction of a street. "Just go straight down the hill and turn left at the big oak tree." "I can't see any tree," Danny said. "Everything is white. The snow is so deep and it's so cold. I can't feel my hands anymore." That made me really worried. If Danny was outside in this weather without proper clothes, he could freeze to death. I ran downstairs to get Mom and Dad again. "There's a kid named Danny Miller lost in our yard," I said. "He needs help right now." Dad sighed and got up from his chair. "Tyler, we've been through this. There's no one outside." But I talked to him. "His name is Danny Miller, and he lives on Oak Street. He's lost and freezing." Mom and Dad looked at each other with that expression parents get when they think their kid is making things up. "Let's go look," Dad said. "But if there's no one there, we're not doing this again." We all went outside with flashlights. The snow crunched under our feet, and the cold air made our breath come out in white puffs. "Danny," I called. "Danny, where are you?" There was no answer. We walked all around the yard, but we didn't find anyone. There were no footprints except ours. "I'm sorry, Tyler," Dad said, "but there's nobody here. You must be hearing things." I knew they didn't believe me, but I also knew Danny was real. Somehow, he was out there, and he needed help. The third night, Danny's voice was closer. It sounded like he was standing right next to my bed. "Tyler," he whispered. "Tyler, are you there?" I sat up quickly. Danny? How do you know my name? You're the only one who can hear me, he said. You're the only one who tried to help. Where are you? I still can't see you. I'm getting closer, Danny said. Every night, I get a little closer to your house. The cold is bringing me to you. That didn't make sense, but I didn't want to argue. Are you okay? Do you need food or water? Danny laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I don't need those things anymore. I haven't needed them for a long time. What do you mean? I'm not like other kids anymore, Tyler. The cold changed me. It made me part of the winter. I was starting to get scared, but I tried to stay calm. Danny, I want to help you get home. Can you tell me exactly where you are? I am home, he said. This is where I belong now. In the cold, in the snow, in the dark places where no one can see me. The next morning, I decided to find out more about Danny Miller. I asked my friend Ben, who lived on Oak Street, if he knew anyone named Danny. Danny Miller? Ben thought for a minute. Oh yeah, I think my mom mentioned that name once. But it was a long time ago. When I got home from school, I asked Mom if she had ever heard of Danny Miller. Mom's face went pale. Where did you hear that name? Just around, I said. Do you know him? Mom sat down at the kitchen table and motioned for me to sit too. Tyler, Danny Miller, was a little boy who lived on Oak Street about 20 years ago. He got lost in a blizzard one winter night, and, well, they never found him. My heart started beating fast. What do you mean they never found him? He went outside to play in the snow after dinner. When his parents called him in, he didn't answer. They looked everywhere, but the snow was too deep and the storm was too bad. When morning came, they found his tracks leading into the woods, but the trail disappeared. Did he die? Mom nodded sadly. They think so. He would have frozen to death in that storm. They had a funeral for him, even though they never found his body. I felt sick to my stomach. The voice I had been hearing wasn't from a living boy who was lost. It was from someone who had died 20 years ago. That night, I didn't want to listen for Danny's voice, but I heard it anyway. Tyler, he called. I'm almost there. I can see your house now. I pulled my blankets over my head, but I could still hear him clearly. Don't hide from me, Danny said. We're friends now. You're the first person who has talked to me in 20 years. You're dead, I whispered. You died in the snow a long time ago. Yes, Danny said, and his voice was sad. I died alone and scared in the woods. But I didn't stay dead, Tyler. The cold kept me alive in a different way. I peeked out from under my blankets. Through my window, I could see a shape standing in our yard. It looked like a boy about my age, but he was pale and white like the snow around him. There you are, Danny said, and I could see his mouth moving as he spoke. You can see me now. Danny was wearing the same clothes he must have died in, a thin jacket, sneakers, and jeans. They were covered with frost and ice. His skin was blue-white, and his hair was frozen solid. I've been looking for someone like you, Danny said. Someone who can hear voices from a cold. Someone who can see the frozen dead. What do you want? I asked, even though I was terrified. I want a friend, Danny said. I want someone to talk to. I've been alone for so long. I can't be your friend, I said. You're not alive. Danny's face looked hurt. That's not fair. I didn't choose to die. I just wanted to play in the snow. I'm sorry you died, I said, but you need to go away. You're scaring me. I can't go away, Danny said. This is where I belong now, and you belong with me. He started walking toward the house. With each step, the temperature in my room got colder. Ice began forming on the inside of my window. You understand what it's like to be different, Danny said. You can hear things other people can't hear. You can see things other people can't see. That means you're special, like me. The ice on my window was getting thicker. My breath was coming out in white puffs, even though the heat was on. Come outside, Tyler, Danny said. Come play with me in the snow. It's not scary once you get used to being cold. No, I said. I won't. Danny pressed his face against my window. His eyes were white like frozen marbles, and frost covered his eyelashes. You will come outside, he said. Tonight or tomorrow night or the night after that. I have all the time in the world to wait. And every night, I'll get a little closer. The next morning, there were handprints frozen on my window. Small, child-sized handprints that looked like they were made of ice. I told Mom and Dad everything, but they still didn't believe me. They said I was having nightmares and that the handprints were just frost patterns. But I knew better. Danny was real, and he was getting stronger. The fourth night, I woke up because my room was freezing cold. There was ice on my blankets and frost on the walls. When I looked at my window, Danny was inside my room. He was sitting in my desk chair, smiling at me. Snow fell from his hair when he moved his head. Hello, Tyler, he said. I found a way inside. I wanted to scream, but I was too scared to make a sound. It's warmer in here, Danny said, but not by much. The cold follows me everywhere I go. How did you get in? Cold air finds a way, Danny said. Through cracks in the windows, under doors, down chimneys. I'm part of the cold now, so I can go anywhere it goes. He stood up and walked over to my bed. Where his feet touched the floor, they left patches of ice. I've been thinking about what you said, Danny continued. About how I'm dead and you're alive, and how we can't be friends because of that. Please don't hurt me, I whispered. I'm not going to hurt you, Tyler. I'm going to help you. I'm going to make it so we can be the same. He reached out to touch my face with his frozen hand. It will only hurt for a little while. Then you'll be like me, and we can play together forever. I rolled out of bed and ran for the door, but it was frozen shut. Ice covered the doorknob, and no matter how hard I pulled, it wouldn't open. There's nowhere to go, Danny said. The whole house is getting cold now. Soon your family will be like us too. I could hear the ice spreading through the walls, crackling and popping as it froze everything it touched. The heat was no match for the supernatural cold that Danny brought with him. Why are you doing this? I asked. Because I'm lonely, Danny said, and because you're the first person who could see me. That makes you special. It means you're already a little bit like me. He was right. I could see and hear things that other people couldn't. Maybe that did make me different. Maybe I was more like Danny than I wanted to admit. I don't want to be dead, I said. You won't be dead, Danny replied. You'll be something else, something better. You'll never get sick or grow old or be afraid. The cold was getting stronger. I could feel it seeping into my bones, making me sleepy and numb. Just let it happen, Danny whispered. Let the cold take you. It's peaceful once you stop fighting it. I was getting so tired. The cold was like a blanket, heavy and comfortable. It would be so easy to just lie down and let it cover me completely. But then I thought about Mom and Dad and how sad they would be if I disappeared like Danny had. I thought about all the things I still wanted to do, all the warm summer days I would miss. I fought against the cold with everything I had. I thought about hot chocolate and sunny beaches and campfires. I remembered what it felt like to be warm and alive. The ice in my room started to crack. Danny looked surprised. You're stronger than I thought, he said, but it won't matter. I'll come back tomorrow night and the next night and the next. Eventually, you'll be too tired to fight. Maybe, I said, but not tonight. I kept thinking warm thoughts until the ice melted and my door unlocked. Danny faded away like mist, but I could hear his voice as he disappeared. I'll be waiting for you, Tyler. In the cold, in the snow. I'll always be waiting. The next day, I convinced my parents to let us visit my aunt in Florida for the rest of the winter. I told them I was having bad dreams about the cold. We stayed in Florida until spring came. When we got back home, I never heard Danny's voice again. But sometimes on the coldest winter nights, I see his small figure standing in our yard. He's always there, patient and still, waiting for me to come outside and join him in the snow. I never do, but part of me wonders what it would be like to never be afraid of the cold again. Part of me understands why Danny wants a friend, and that's the part that scares me the most. I first noticed something was wrong with my shadow on a bright winter morning. The sun was shining on the fresh snow, making everything sparkle like diamonds. I was walking to school when I happened to look down at my shadow on the white ground. It wasn't moving the same way I was. When I took a step forward, my shadow took a step to the side. When I raised my right hand, my shadow raised its left hand. It was like looking in a broken mirror. I stopped walking and stared at the dark shape on the snow. For a moment, my shadow stopped too. Then it turned its head to look at me, even though I was looking straight ahead. That's impossible, I thought. Shadows don't move by themselves. I shook my head and kept walking to school. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the bright sun reflecting off the snow was playing tricks on my eyes. But during recess, I noticed it again. We were playing in the schoolyard, and I could see everyone's shadows moving normally on the snow. Everyone's except mine. My shadow was dancing while I was standing still. It was spinning in circles while I talked to my friend Kate. When I pointed at something, my shadow pointed in the opposite direction. "Hey Kate," I said, "look at my shadow. Does it look weird to you?" Kate glanced down at the snow. "Looks normal to me, Alex." "What?" I looked down too. Now, my shadow was behaving normally, copying my movements exactly. "Never mind," I said, but I felt confused and a little scared. That night, I decided to test my shadow. I stood in front of my bedroom window where the streetlight outside would cast my shadow on the wall. I raised my arms, and my shadow raised its arms. I jumped, and my shadow jumped. Everything seemed fine until I turned to walk away from the window. My shadow stayed put. I looked back at the wall. My shadow was still there, standing in the same spot, even though I was across the room. It slowly turned its head toward me and waved. My heart started pounding. I ran to the wall and put my hand where my shadow was standing. My real shadow appeared on the wall next to the other one. Now, there were two shadows of me, and they were both looking at each other. The fake shadow pointed at me, then pointed at itself. It was trying to tell me something, but I didn't understand what. I quickly turned off the lights and went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could picture that shadow standing on my wall, waiting for me. The next day was Saturday. Mom asked me to shovel the driveway after it snowed again overnight. I put on my heavy coat and boots and went outside with the snow shovel. As I worked, I kept checking my shadow on the white driveway. At first, it seemed normal, but after a few minutes, I noticed it was shoveling faster than I was. My shadow would finish scooping up snow before I even bent down to start. Then my shadow stopped working completely. While I kept shoveling, my shadow just stood there with its arms crossed, like it was refusing to help. "That's enough," I said out loud, even though I felt silly talking to a shadow. "You need to copy what I'm doing." My shadow shook its head no. I dropped my shovel and stared at the dark shape on the snow. This was definitely not normal. Shadows don't have opinions. They don't refuse to work. I decided to tell Mom what was happening, but when I got inside, she was on the phone with Grandma. I waited for her to finish, but by the time she hung up, I had lost my courage. Who would believe that my shadow was acting strange? That night, things got worse. I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when I saw my shadow in the mirror. But the shadow was brushing its hair instead of its teeth. And its hair looked different, longer and messier than mine. I stopped brushing and looked closer. The shadow stopped too, but it wasn't holding a toothbrush. It was holding something that looked like a small knife. I spun around to see if someone was standing behind me, but I was alone in the bathroom. When I looked back at the mirror, my shadow was gone completely. I ran to my bedroom and turned on all the lights. I checked every corner, but there were no shadows anywhere. It was like my shadow had disappeared. But when I got into bed and turned off the lights, I could feel something moving around my room in the darkness. I heard footsteps that weren't quite right. They were too light, like someone walking who didn't weigh anything. "Who's there?" I whispered. A voice answered from somewhere near my closet. It sounded exactly like my voice, but it was speaking words I wasn't saying. "I'm here," the voice said. "I've always been here, following you around, copying everything you do. But I'm tired of being just a shadow." I reached for my bedside lamp, but before I could turn it on, cold fingers grabbed my wrist. The fingers felt like ice, and they were stronger than they should have been. "Don't turn on the light," my own voice said. "I can only talk to you in the dark. Light makes me weak and flat." "What are you?" I asked, trying not to panic. "I'm your shadow," the voice replied. "But I'm also something else. Something that's been growing stronger every day, feeding on the cold winter air." The grip on my wrist got tighter. Every person has a shadow, but most shadows are just empty shapes. They don't think or feel anything. But sometimes when the winter is very cold and very long, shadows can become more than that. "I don't understand. The cold makes everything harder and sharper," my shadow explained. "It makes shadows darker and more solid. And when a shadow gets solid enough, it can start to think for itself." I tried to pull my hand away, but the cold fingers wouldn't let go. "I've been watching you live your warm, bright life," my shadow continued. "Going to school, playing with friends, eating hot meals. And I want those things too. But you're just a shadow. You can't have a real life." "That's where you're wrong," my shadow said, and I could hear it smiling in the dark. "I can have your life. All I have to do is switch places with you." The cold fingers started pulling me toward the closet. "You could be the shadow, flat and dark and silent. And I'll be the real person, warm and solid and alive." I struggled against the grip, but my shadow was surprisingly strong. "People will notice I'm different," I said. "My parents will know I'm not really me." "No, they won't," my shadow laughed. "I know everything you know. I've heard every conversation, seen every memory. I could be you better than you can." We reached the closet, and my shadow opened the door. Inside, instead of my clothes, there was just empty blackness that seemed to go on forever. "This is where shadows live when they're not being cast by light," my shadow explained. "It's cold and quiet and very, very dark. You like it once you get used to it." "No!" I shouted and pulled as hard as I could. My hand came free, and I ran for the light switch. But my shadow was faster. It grabbed my ankles and pulled me down to the floor. "You can't run from your own shadow," it said. "I'm part of you. Wherever you go, I go." I crawled toward the door, but every time I got close to a light source, my shadow would pull me back into the darkness. "Think about it," my shadow said. "Wouldn't you rather be in a place where it's never too hot or too bright? Where you never have to worry about sunburn or sweating or getting tired from running around?" It almost sounded nice, but I knew it was a trick. "I like being warm," I said. "I like feeling sunshine and eating ice cream and hugging my parents." "Those are just things your body wants," my shadow replied. "But bodies get old and sick and die. Shadows last forever." I managed to reach my desk lamp and turn it on. Light flooded my room, and my shadow immediately became flat and normal again, attached to my feet like it should be. But I could still hear its voice, quieter now, but still there. "You can't keep the lights on forever," it whispered. "Eventually, you'll have to sleep. And when you do, I'll be waiting." I spent the rest of the night sitting under the bright desk lamp, too scared to move. When morning came, I felt safer, but I knew my shadow was still planning something. At breakfast, Mom noticed I looked tired. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked. I wanted to tell her everything, but I knew she wouldn't believe me. Instead, I just said I had bad dreams. That day, I tried to stay in bright, sunny places where my shadow would be weak. But everywhere I went, I could feel it plotting and planning. When I walked past windows, my shadow would wave at people inside, even though I wasn't waving. When I sat down, my shadow would stand up. It was getting bolder and stronger. That evening, I had an idea. If my shadow wanted to switch places with me, maybe I could trick it instead. I went to my room and set up every lamp and flashlight I could find, all pointing at different spots on the walls and floor. Then I turned off the main light and stood in the middle of the room. My shadow appeared on the wall in front of me, but it looked confused. There were bright lights coming from every direction, making multiple shadows of me all over the room. "Which one is really you?" I asked out loud. My shadow looked around at all the other shadows on the walls. Some were big, some were small, some were stretched out in weird shapes because of the angles of the lights. I don't know, my shadow admitted. "Maybe I'm not the real one," I said. "Maybe I'm just another shadow, and one of those other shadows is the real Alex." My shadow looked more confused. It started moving toward one of the other shadows on the opposite wall. "Are you the real Alex?" it asked the shadow. Of course, the other shadow couldn't answer because it was just a normal shadow. But my shadow didn't know that. While my shadow was distracted, I grabbed a small mirror from my desk and angled it so that it reflected light directly onto the wall where my shadow was standing. The bright reflected light hit my shadow like a slap. It cried out in pain and started to fade. "You tricked me," it gasped. "You tried to steal my life," I replied. "I was just protecting myself." My shadow got fainter and fainter as the light got brighter. "This isn't over," it whispered as it disappeared. "I'll wait for spring to end. When winter comes again, I'll be back, and I'll be stronger." Then it was gone, and all the shadows in my room were behaving normally again. I kept the lights on all night just to be safe. And for the rest of that winter, I made sure to stay in bright places and avoid dark corners. Spring came early that year, and I was never happier to see the snow melt. But I know my shadow was telling the truth about coming back. Every year when winter starts, I stock up on flashlights and extra light bulbs. And every year I notice my shadow getting a little bit darker, a little bit more independent. Someday, it's going to be strong enough to switch places with me permanently. And when that day comes, I'll need to be ready with enough light to keep it away. Because I've learned that everyone has a dark side. But most people's dark sides can't walk around on their own. I'm not most people, and neither is my shadow. The snow started falling when we were driving to Grandma's house for her birthday. At first, it was just a few flakes hitting the windshield. Dad said it would stop soon, but it didn't. It got worse and worse. "Maybe we should turn around," Mom said, looking worried as the snow got thicker. "We're already halfway there," Dad replied. "We'll be fine." My little sister Amy was asleep in the back seat next to me. She had her stuffed rabbit pressed against her face. I wished I could sleep too, but the storm was getting scary. The wind was howling so loud it sounded like a wild animal. Soon, Dad had to slow down because he couldn't see the road very well. The snow was coming down so hard it looked like a white curtain in front of us. The windshield wipers were working as fast as they could, but they couldn't keep up. "I can't see anything," Dad said, gripping the steering wheel tight. "We need to find somewhere to wait this out." That's when we saw the house. It appeared through the snow like a ship in fog. It was old and big, with a long front porch and warm yellow lights in the windows. "Thank goodness," Mom said. "Maybe they'll let us wait inside until the storm passes." Dad turned into the driveway. The snow was so deep our car got stuck before we reached the house. The engine made a grinding noise and then died. "Great," Dad muttered. "We're stuck." Amy woke up when the car stopped. "Where are we?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Don't worry, sweetie," Mom said. "We're going to ask these nice people if we can come inside where it's warm." We got out of the car and walked through the deep snow to the front door. The wind was so strong it almost knocked me over. Snow got in my eyes and mouth, and my hands were already getting numb, even with gloves on. Dad knocked on the big wooden door. We waited, shivering on the porch. After a minute, the door opened. A woman stood there, smiling at us. She was older, maybe 50, with gray hair pulled back in a bun. She wore a long blue dress that looked old-fashioned. "Oh my," she said in a sweet voice. "You poor things. Come in out of that terrible storm." We hurried inside, grateful to be out of the wind and snow. The house was warm and cozy. There was a big fireplace with a fire crackling in it, and the walls were covered with old paintings and photographs. "I'm Mrs. Winter," the woman said, "and this is my husband, Mr. Winter." A tall man with a white beard came out of another room. He was wearing suspenders and had kind eyes. "Welcome to our home," he said. "You picked a bad night to be driving." "Thank you so much," Dad said. "Our car got stuck in your driveway. I hope you don't mind us asking for help." "Not at all," Mrs. Winter said. "We love having visitors. It gets so lonely out here, especially in winter." She took our coats and hung them by the fire to dry. Amy held on her stuffed rabbit and stayed close to Mom. I looked around the house while the adults talked. The living room was full of old furniture and books. Everything looked like it was from a long time ago. There were no computers or TVs, just old lamps and wooden chairs. On the mantel above the fireplace were lots of photographs in fancy frames. I walked over to look at the pictures. They showed people in old-fashioned clothes standing in front of the house. But something was strange about the photos. Everyone in them looked sad, and their eyes seemed to follow me as I moved. "Those are pictures of all the families who have stayed with us over the years," Mrs. Winter said, appearing beside me. "We've had so many visitors during bad storms. They all look unhappy," I said. Mrs. Winter's smile got bigger. "Oh, they were very happy here. So happy they never wanted to leave." That gave me a weird feeling in my stomach, but before I could think about it more, Mr. Winter called us to the kitchen for dinner. The kitchen was warm and smelled like roast chicken. There was a long wooden table set with plates and candles. Mrs. Winter brought out big bowls of food, mashed potatoes, green beans, and thick slices of bread with butter. "This is wonderful," Mom said. "Thank you for being so kind to strangers." "Oh, you're not strangers," Mr. Winter said. "We feel like we've known you forever." The food was delicious, but I noticed something odd. Even though we were eating a lot, the bowls never seemed to get empty. Every time I looked, they were still full. And the candles on the table never got shorter, even though they had been burning for an hour. Amy fell asleep in her chair after dinner. Mr. Winter carried her to a bedroom upstairs. "She can sleep here," he said, "and you folks can have a room next door." "We don't want to impose," Dad said. "Maybe the storm will stop soon and we can get our car unstuck." Mrs. Winter looked out the window and shook her head. "I'm afraid it's getting worse. You'll have to stay the night, maybe longer." I looked outside too. She was right. The snow was falling even harder now. It was piled up against the windows and the wind sounded like it was screaming. Mom and Dad agreed we should stay. Mrs. Winter showed us to our rooms upstairs. The hallway was long and dark, with more old photographs on the walls. In the dim light, the people in the pictures looked even sadder. My room was small but cozy, with a soft bed and a window that looked out at the storm. I could hear the wind howling and tree branches scratching against the glass. I tried to sleep, but something felt wrong. The house was too quiet except for the storm outside. I couldn't hear Mom and Dad talking in the next room, or Amy moving around her bed. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and heavy, like someone walking very carefully. I got up and opened my door crack to look out. Mrs. Winter was walking down the hall, but she looked different. Her nice dress was torn and dirty, and her hair was hanging loose around her face. Her skin looked pale and gray in the moonlight coming through the window. She stopped at Amy's door and turned the handle slowly. I wanted to call out, but I was too scared to make a sound. Mrs. Winter went into Amy's room and closed the door behind her. A few minutes later, she came out again, but now she was carrying something, a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. I couldn't see what it was, but my heart started pounding. Where was Amy? Mrs. Winter walked to the end of the hall and opened a door I hadn't noticed before. Cold air rushed out, and I could see snow blowing around inside. She disappeared through the door with the bundle. I ran to Amy's room and opened the door. The bed was empty. Amy was gone. I rushed to Mom and Dad's room and shook Dad awake. "Dad, Amy's gone. That woman took her." Dad sat up, confused. What are you talking about?" "Mrs. Winter took Amy somewhere. There's a door at the end of the hall that leads outside." Dad and Mom got up quickly, and we went to look for Amy. But when we got to the end of the hallway, there was no door. Just a blank wall with another old photograph hanging on it. "There was a door here," I insisted. "I saw her go through it." "You must have been dreaming," Mom said, but she looked worried too. We went to Amy's room. She was lying in bed, fast asleep with her stuffed rabbit. She looked fine, but something was different. Her skin was very pale, almost white, and when I touched her hand, it was ice cold. "Amy," I whispered. "Amy, wake up." She opened her eyes, but they looked different. They were pale blue, almost white like ice. And when she smiled at me, I could see her breath in the air, even though the room was warm. "I'm fine," she said in a voice that sounded far away. "Mrs. Winter showed me the most beautiful place. It's all white and quiet, and it never gets warm." Mom felt Amy's forehead. "She's freezing cold. We need to get her to a doctor." "I don't want to leave," Amy said. "I like it here. The Winter family is so nice. They want me to stay forever." Dad tried to pick Amy up, but she was stiff and heavy, like she was frozen solid. Her skin was turning more white, and frost was forming on her eyelashes. "We have to get out of here," Dad said. "Something's very wrong." We tried to leave, but the front door wouldn't open. Dad pulled and pushed, but it was like the door was frozen shut. The windows were covered with so much snow we couldn't see outside at all. "Going somewhere?" Mrs. Winter asked from behind us. We turned around. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs, smiling that same sweet smile. But now I could see her teeth were sharp like icicles, and her eyes were solid white. "The storm isn't over yet," she said. "You need to stay longer, much longer." Mr. Winter appeared beside her. His beard was white with frost, and when he breathed, ice crystals came out of his mouth. "We've been so lonely," he said. "We need a family to keep us company. Forever." I looked at the photographs on the walls again. Now I understood why everyone in them looked so sad. They weren't visitors who had stayed during storms. They were people who had been trapped here, turned into frozen prisoners. Amy walked over to Mrs. Winter and took her hand. "Can I stay?" she asked. "Can I be part of your family?" "Of course, dear," Mrs. Winter said. "You're already becoming one of us." I could see frost spreading across Amy's face like spider webs. Her lips were turning blue, and her eyes were getting whiter. Dad grabbed Amy and pulled her away from Mrs. Winter. "Run," he yelled. We ran toward the back of the house, looking for another way out. The Winter family followed us, walking slowly but never falling behind. Their footsteps left patches of ice on the wooden floor. In the kitchen, Dad found a door that led to the basement. We ran down the stairs into the cold, dark cellar. I could hear Mrs. Winter calling to us from upstairs. "You can't hide forever," she sang in her sweet voice. "The cold will find you. It always does." In the basement, we found another door hidden behind some old boxes. Dad forced it open and cold air rushed in. It led to a tunnel that went outside. We crawled through the tunnel with Amy between us. She was getting heavier and colder, but we didn't give up. The tunnel ended in the woods behind the house. The storm was still raging, but we could see our car in the driveway. Dad carried Amy while Mom and I struggled through the snow. The wind was so strong it knocked us down twice. When we reached the car, Dad tried to start it. The engine turned over once, twice, then roared to life. We drove away as fast as we could on the snowy road. In the back seat, Amy was shivering violently. Slowly, her skin started to get some color back, and her eyes turned brown again instead of white. "I had the strangest dream," she said. "I dreamed I lived in a house made of ice with a family that never got warm. We drove all night, until we found a hospital in the next town. The doctor said Amy had mild frostbite, but she would be okay. They couldn't understand how she had gotten so cold inside a warm house. We never told anyone what really happened. Who would believe us? But sometimes on really cold winter nights, when the wind is howling, I think I can hear Mrs. Winter calling my name. And I know that somewhere out there, in a house that appears during blizzards, the Winter family is still waiting for visitors who will stay forever.